Namaste, my friends. My name is Christopher Witecki. Welcome to Circle of Wisdom. This is our weekly conversation where we invite all of our friends and family to join the conversation. We dive deep into a topic, and when I say we, I'm referring to myself and my co-host, Master Tarot Master Christopher OneFeather. Hello, Master OneFeather. How are you this week?
Oh, really great. You know, it's a roller coaster ride here in the Midwest. 2 days ago, it was bordering 80 degrees, and I was sitting on the back porch about this time enjoying the sun. And today it's struggling to get into the 40s, so I think we were taking that plunge, the autumnal plunge.
Into the winter.
Yes.
I'm from the Midwest, and I can remember that year after year we would kind of be fooled to be warm in the beginning, but then by Halloween we had to wear our coats over our costumes, almost always.
Yes, and this weekend I think we're going to end up at Great America, so if we're
Oh,
frightened.
Great America! Six Flags,
Yes.
Great America! I love Six
So
Flags.
hopefully the weather will be, on board with outdoor festive activities. So we'll see.
Yeah, I hope so. I like this time. We're having the same kind of polarity, ironically. I mean, that's interesting. The sun's in Scorpio, but same in California. Today, actually, it's the opposite. I was enjoying that it was getting cool, and now it's back up to a very warm. You could go swimming.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah, we're your opposite.
I would imagine that Joel is not surrounded by temperate climes. I think
We
he's
had
up in Canada.
27 degrees yesterday, and I don't know, about 5 or 6 degrees today.
Wow.
Canada is just sucks with weather.
Yes. You Canucks really get shortchanged on the whole weather range, but. And Mary, I don't even remember where you are. You're in what, California?
No, I'm just south of you. I'm in Lombard, Illinois.
Oh, okay. So another one in the greater Chicagoland area. So you know what I'm talking about as far as
Absolutely.
this sudden plunge of temperature.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a
it's gotta
certain
get hot.
comfort to it. There's a certain comfort to it, though, I think,
Oh
nesting
yeah.
in, that you totally like. Well, polarity of weather is a good setup. Today, I thought we would talk about the fight or flight syndrome. That was our topic for the day, and to me, this is a really powerful topic. Master OneFeather, I think, is he underlined it last week so much, talking about the battle with the ego, and I really think that as Saturn is in Scorpio at this moment, and the Sun is also in Scorpio, we're going to get to the deepest conscious bottom, let's say, of our emotional limits. And this is something we do every time Saturn is in Scorpio. We get to the bottom of our emotional limits, we draw fundamental lines with ourself, and then the world has to pay the consequences of those. Our world, everyone's sphere of influence, pays consequences of those lines. And Scorpio itself is very fight or flight. And I just did some research thinking about this through the week, and I was going back to really the most recent time that Saturn was last in Scorpio, which was in the 80s, from December 82 to November 85. And from 82 to 85, I can remember that time personally, and at that time, I was drawing a lot of deep emotional boundaries, and I would definitely say that they were very fight or flight based. And for the last 30 years, I think my emotional subconscious has been always to go to fight or flight first. But so I identify. Master OneFeather, tell me in your eyes, sir, what fight or flight is and where you think it originates in people.
Well, I think it definitely originates in fear, and I think fear is the primal concern as far as how we create our lifestyle in this realm. Fear generates anger. Your first initial reaction is fear. Oh, I can be harmed. I can be hurt. So then you get angry. Then I'm pissed off, and I'm going to get even with the guy who's causing me to feel fear. And then it escalates into a multitude of other variations on a simple core experience that we have, and that's because we've forgotten our invulnerability. We, as in our truth, are invincible and invulnerable. But coming down into this lower realm, we have taken on those attributes of being vulnerable to everything. You know, I mean, right now we've got a huge vulnerability factor that's being generated in the public's consciousness around Ebola.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got ISIS, and we've got this, and we've got that, and all of those things generate anger. So as we're moving around, I think the collective consciousness is always trying to address that anger, to identify it, to heal it. But I think our core anger comes from a sense of guilt that we have somehow sinned, that we, you know, you can go all the way back to the idea of original sin, where we get laden with guilt in most religious paradigms. So you don't even have to take action. Just, pardon me, just the fact that you were born creates the image or that theological idea of original sin. And that, I think, is at the core of all of the different fight or flight tendencies.
You think in the human race, you know, this is a thing that goes all the way back to the idea of original sin, that we have this guilt in our consciousness for screwing over God 1,000 years ago.
Well, more than 1,000, but yes.
Or whatever. Yes, yeah, I have no idea to put the number to it. I'm not sure we screwed over God, Lord, but.
Well, no, absolutely not. We indulged in the fantasy of separation, but, you know,
okay.
God certainly was not pissed off. That was a guilt that we created for ourselves. We wrapped ourselves in that robe, you know.
That's the whole thing, I think. It's like if you look at the Bible as the evolution of human consciousness versus a story, it seems like to me, you know, the first sin is before the first sin, Adam and Eve didn't have any concept of boundaries whatsoever.
Exactly.
No clothes. No, there was no end. There was no beginning. They seem to be in a timelessness with God in the Garden of Eden.
Exactly.
And then, of course, something in that timelessness tempts them, whatever it is. And as soon as they cross God's line, there are lines forever. And it's like, and that is once we turn our back on God, you're saying. So you're saying that in the evolution of human consciousness, once we turn our back on God, we then feel guilty for it.
Yeah, and you know, the next step in that thought process is retribution from God. So we have the first step is one of guilt. The second step is one of fear. So, you know, and then of course you naturally progress into a variety of other, you know, variations on that idea. But yeah, there's actually a great book that is out on the internet. You can you can buy a used copy on Amazon for like less than $1, and it's called "Who Told You That You Were Naked," which is
I've heard about that book before. Who told you?
Yeah. John Jacob Raub, who is a Trappist monk in Kentucky at the same monastery that Thomas Merton was at, very highly evolved soul. And he put that book together to address that whole vision that is so much a core of the Catholic mentality, which is that guilt of original sin. He helps you to examine that idea and ultimately how to step out of that embracing that original notion that you had betrayed God.
Do you think, I mean, like, putting that in practical terms, it's like betraying God in the sense of feeling guilty that you turned your back on God, or feeling guilty that you did not go to God? I mean, in practical today, how does that play out today? How's that playing into my fight or flight when someone cuts me off on the 405?
Well,
it's not original sin then, my friend.
No.
But I mean, like, I believe
it
roots in it, just like you say. I do believe it roots in it. But where do you see today where people are feeling guilty over this kind of thing with God? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's like a peach pit. You know, at the core of it, you have to get through the outer membrane, the skin, and the fruit in order to work your way down to the core. But basically, the reason that you are incited by somebody cutting you off in traffic is twofold. The first is that your ego responds to the other person's ego. The other person is, get the hell out of my way, I'm more important than you. And your ego is going to respond by saying, well, screw you, I'm as important, if not more important than you. So you got that basic core dynamic going on. Then on top of that, underneath that, you have that fundamental dynamic of a person wants to harm me. This is an attack on me. He is violating me, and so therefore, I am attacked. Mm-hmm. And that
bad things are happening to me.
Right.
God must be mad at me.
So then that inspires fear, and then fear inspires anger. So it's a very vicious circle, and it goes on every level of our interaction with each other here on the planet.
Biological too, obviously. I mean, you see a bear and it will save your life. Fight or flight will save your life. I mean, in rare circumstances, to some degree. Like if you were the bear or something. I mean,
well, it'll save your body. I mean, your life is far beyond just the body. But
okay,
we identify so immediately with the body. And yeah, you don't want to get bumped out of your body until you've started to figure out, that deeper level of identity, which is, I am not a body. I am, in fact, a spiritual being who's driving around in a bumper car that we call a body.
I agree, but I would say that there is a biological instinct in us that we are trying to tame, as well as your notion too. Like to some degree, it's biological. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a conditioning that we created to get us the hell away from the raging animals in the jungle around us. I mean, it does go back to the lizard brain level of physical identity.
Mm-hmm. And the weird thing about it is that in human consciousness, I think this is obviously, I agree with you 100% that this is something we're trying to work through, and it is also a big perpetuator of karma, in the sense that people react, and then it creates a reaction, and then it creates a reaction, and then it creates a reaction, and over your lifetime, you're reacting to the reaction of the reaction of the reaction of the reaction, like the wicked stepchild, great stepchild of the first fight or flight maybe impression. Mm-hmm. So you really get it to the point where this is where I'm actually undoing myself. I think people with alcoholism, people with addiction, people with all sorts of things that they battle to try to end these deep cycles, a lot of it kind of pairs off this fight or flight. Like for myself, what I have recognized in this Saturn come to Scorpio routine is, in the 80s, the last time Saturn was in Scorpio, my house was crazy. My parents were in the height of their fighting, and there was an emotional divorce, so the family was splitting, and so there was the whole energy of the house was extremely chaotic. But I would believe that I probably was in my past life living in something like that, because I was born kind of freaked out before they broke apart. So now, as Saturn returns here and is about to wrap up in the next 2 months, I find myself not wanting fight or flight, so tired of that kind of drama. I've been working towards ending that sort of drama, but even in the depths of trying to end it, I find that there's a deep, there are deep parts of me that are comforted by it. That that part of myself will want to try to start another emergency or fire, or I find myself gravitating. So I find that in this first stage of ending fight or flight, it's like you recognize it's deep within you, but also it comes up, and I feel like you have to let it pass you by in that moment.
Well, that's definitely true. Also, you have to look at the placement of this activity. You being a Taurus, this is definitely going to be a real highlight of your own internal duality, because it's, the activity, the motion of the planet is happening in Scorpio. That's in opposition to your sun. The lesson is occurring in that region of Scorpio, and again, that's opposing your sun, so you're resisting, getting the message, and And that's why it's been such a struggle for so long. But you're finally at that point where you're surrendering to learning that ultimate outcome, ultimate process that is going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the hard part. It's like, you know, you feel like you're drowning and people say surrender, and you're like, fuck you.
Right, exactly.
It's like, I'm not going to drown. You know, and of course, no one's reaching in to help at that point. You know, it's all ego, and I'm drowning, and, you know.
Well, and the way out of this dynamic, because it will reappear over and over again until you actually figure out the formula for healing this particular thing, and it all reverts back to the idea of forgiveness. If you can forgive the other person and forgive yourself, then the entire paradigm has been exploded, because that means that you finally invested in your own identity as a spiritual being, and you know that even if this guy comes up and stabs you in the forehead or puts a bullet in your brain or whatever, that you're just losing a body, but you are still very much alive and probably somewhat more awakened as a result of that experience. So ultimately, recognizing the non-reality of our basis of fear, because our fear is all placed on the identity of the body, then you're able to forgive and release. So spirituality is at the core of all healing, simply because you have to see yourself in your spiritual identity in order to be able to release that fantasy of being available to be murdered or whatever, mutilated, that sort of thing. You know, one of the things I like from A Course in Miracles, there's a passage in there that I think is really cool. It says, the holiest of all the spots on earth is where an ancient hatred has become a present love. And I think that whole idea of, the systemic nature of everything we're talking about here. We have this history of multiple lifetimes of fear and flight and, paranoia and misery and sickness, etc. And when we are in the moment, in this particular moment, and we finally surrender and accept our truth, that creates the act of forgiveness, which in fact goes back and heals the past and rearranges the future, so that you're no longer attached to the past and identifying it, and at the same time you're no longer prone in the future to repeating the past. So the profound nature of the acceptance of your spiritual being is so huge in this world, and yet so few people really go to the core of that idea to help people understand this is the real core of every problem that you're addressing in your life.
Okay, so how does someone get to their truth? You say getting to your truth. You say getting to your truth will heal the future and heal the past. And
right.
My third eye went there with you in the sense that yes, but what is that? How do we So if you're a person like you're a waitress that's working too many hours and you're stuck in the car and you're upset and and you're angry and everything, the world's against you. It's like, what do you say to the person? Where's her truth in that moment?
Well, it's like any other thing. I think that there's definitely, again, I go back to reference one of the passages from the Bible. Jesus says, "Wide is the path, but narrow is the gate." And really, all of us are on a path. There is one gate that is a very narrow opening that we all have to enter. And the way that we enter the gate is by allowing it to be identified for us. So in order to hear what's coming through to you from spirit, because spirit is always there, is always trying to get the idea across, you just have to bring yourself to a state of stillness. And a lot of times that can happen when you're engaged in the most mundane of activities. You know, you're at the kitchen washing dishes, and you get into that free space, and you actually stop thinking for a millisecond. And that's enough to have that first spark come through. It doesn't have to, you don't have to enter into silence for days in order to get the message. You know, a lot of times we get the message one word or one letter of a word at a time. So these little sparks, if you pay attention to them, they'll start to come together, and collectively you'll get the entire paragraph. And the entire paragraph is the key to identifying the door that you want to unlock.
I agree with that. I think what I struggle with is I'm an action-based Taurus, first of all, not just Taurus, 18 degrees, so I'm all about action. And so I just, my ego wants to do something about it. I think that's my biggest, like, you want to do anything. You just, for some reason, there's something so deep in my being, and I think it might be fight or flight at the root, that wants to do something. And of course it's like, well, do you want to hurt someone? Well, no. You know, you start interviewing yourself of what you can do, and that's what part of the frustration is there seems to be nothing you can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that moment of, so in that moment, it's like, to me, getting to your truth is trying to get to the heart of it, which I have to say my heart resists most of the time. It's like, I don't know, something's resisting me to get to the heart of it until that ego is satisfied with some sort of action. So I'm finding I have to kind of channel that action to get myself calmed down.
Yeah, and that's where spiritual disciplines like Qigong and
Chanting.
things like that, yoga, all of these different modalities that have been around
Spiritual
for
action.
centuries.
Yeah.
They help you to disassociate from the body by getting the body engaged, and then all of a sudden you're engaged, and finally you kind of flip out of being connected to the body, and you arrive at that tranquil place. You know, a great movie and a great book. The book was called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. The movie that came along as a subsequent effect of that was The Peaceful Warrior. But that is a great book that gives you a real good overview of how this young kid who was in school in Berkeley was an Olympic aspirant, and he goes through that process of awakening to the realization that there's something much more profound in life than what he was imagining life to be. So I would recommend people go out and get their hands on that book or check out the movie. The movie was really well done with Nick Nolte playing, the spiritual guru of this kid.
When did that come out?
I think it's been out for about 7 or 8 years now.
Nick Nolte, huh? You said Nick Nolte.
Nick Nolte was the spiritual guy, and they had a young Jewish kid by the name of Scott Malkowitz, who was playing Dan Millman. Millman was the one who wrote the book, and the book was autobiographical.
Oh, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So I would think that bringing it full circle to this moment here in the next, we had a solar eclipse at the exact 0 degree of Scorpio, and I believe that to some this offers astrologically, along with some other factors going on, Neptune in Pisces to bring compassion, forgiveness, Jupiter in Leo to bring love. We have the ingredients here for some good old-fashioned spiritual healing right now, and a lot of it has to do with, I think, healing these swollen emotional boundaries that people have. And I'm noticing, looking through time, just observing the last 30 years, knowing Saturn Scorpio, knowing my parents' stories at that time and seeing where they are now, and being an astrologer, I can see that, folks, this particular time in the next between now and Christmas is one where the decisions you make with yourself will settle into a very deep, deep, deep subconscious Scorpio kind of frequency. And they kind of become your default unless you sit there and meditate, on what your actual course of action is. And that's what these planets do. They bring things up to the surface to look at them, and then they get pulled back down into the consciousness, and we look at something else. So I thought I would share the last couple times that Saturn was in Scorpio, because I think they really kind of set up a lot of our cultural deep emotional limits. So we all know that 82 to 85 was the last time Saturn was in Scorpio, and I think that probably divorce, the Cold War, the divide between rich and poor, these are the big evidences of boundary issues and looking at the boundaries. The time before that was 1953 to 1956. 1953 to 1956. You're shaking your head there, Mary. She's like, oh, yeah. But to me, that knowing my pretty decent knowledge of history, it seems to me that that was that seems like a time where there was a lot of struggling with boundaries, Master One. Isn't that kind of when the Beatles and everything were starting to burst at the seams there and break the nice little mold that they just put the Earth into after World War II?
Well, not in '56, no.
You don't think so? It wasn't like...
the Beatles actually landed on this continent, I believe, in '63 or early '64.
Okay, so maybe this was Kennedy. I guess I don't have I'm very clouded.
Well, that's when we all liked Ike, number one.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So we buckled down in the '50s. Okay.
Yeah, and Wally and his brother were, the Beeb were.
Wally.
Yeah, they were doing their thing. So yeah, that era, actually, if you want to look at it musically, you'd be looking at the real birth of rock and roll. When a few years later we saw Elvis emerge and people like that, Buddy Holly, all of those people were just starting to, come on the scene.
Okay, so this is actually, so you're right. So I'm actually thinking that, so Saturn, I would say Saturn in Scorpio at that time was a restrictive force, 53 to 56.
It was, I wouldn't say so much restrictive as it was very dutiful. We all were busy little, what's the word for it, beavers trying to accomplish, trying to transcend things, that sort of thing. So it was a very committed time, I guess, and we all believed in this vision that television, which was a new phenomenon in the country, was presenting us with, as far as who we were, as far as what our identity is. So it was quite an interesting era, absolutely.
I would say it sounds like, yeah, okay. So it sounds like though it was like the decisions are being made for people. That's what I'm saying. A lot of the decisions are being made for people. The time before that was Saturn was in Scorpio 1924 to 1926. So that was an interesting time too. I would imagine that's a time when the stock market really started to loosen up. People started to really open up in that one.
Yeah, that was an interesting era because, we had a lot of identity things going on, and that entire generation back then that was that group of people who identified themselves as being the lost generation. So it was a very interesting era. It absolutely was.
And it seems like, looking at Saturn and Scorpio, I think our sexuality, Scorpio rules sexuality, but that's also because it's, to me, that's the greatest between life and death. The next greatest boundary is in or out. Naked or clothed. And then it just keeps getting. So Scorpio pretty much rules all down, and sexual attitudes. I know it's like in the 20s they loosened up. We got more sexual officially. Girls started getting sexual, but then in the 50s, 53 to 56, I'd say we tightened up. But then I would say in 82 to 85 we loosened up again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that this is true. With the ping ponging of the humans. Reaction as we go back and forth. But what's different from this whole century, though, I believe, is now it feels like we're at least on top of the waviness to where we can start to maybe end the madness.
Well, yeah, that's the ideal outcome.
Right.
How practical that is, whoops, I apologize for that. That's the second time that's happened.
We can see you.
Stuff going on.
And the madness.
Yeah, and I think that what we're really trying to do here, what we're really focusing on at this point is, because of the internet, we're trying to share the communication around these visions and ideas. You've been doing this tirelessly for 5 years now, if not longer. And I think that we're seeing this amped up, and that's where the seed is, the potential is for something to actually occur. Because we were limited by national boundaries and by geographical boundaries and by communication boundaries for literally forever. And now, for the first time, we have arrived at a point where we have really exploded our communication boundaries, and I think that's why this is a period that's very rich with potential for something very, very significant to occur.
That's a very good point. We've in this particular Saturn and Scorpio, the information. You could say that the marriage broke down in the 80s. Like for the first time, there was a freedom of sexuality. You could say the baby boomers were free sexually, but they all ran off and got married. And then one or two of them got divorced. You know what I mean? So,
well, and a lot of them.
Go ahead.
Well, that was the arrival of that whole concept of a legal partnership, rather as opposed to the idea of the institution of marriage.
Yeah.
So and that's created people like Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn, who I think they just recently did in fact get married, but they had 2 kids or 3 kids. They lived together for forever. They were a perfect couple. They survived all the trials and tribulations of being public figures and living in Hollywood, and yet they had not gone that avenue of traditional marriage. And I think that was definitely a key element in that transformation of our ideas about partnerships and commitment.
Well, here now where we are, I would say 30 years later, we're all in a Kurt Russell, Goldie Hawn situation. Except for the for gay population, which is experiencing the ability to unionize legally for the first time, and really even in publicly. Even 30 years ago, marriage or not, gay people didn't feel as safe holding hands down the street 30 years ago. Now, so you can see that we've come a long way. And I think it all comes down to really, and this is where it all comes down to, it all comes down to really boundaries with yourself. To hit it home, with what you've said and what we've been talking about, whether or not you're going to react to a fight or flight situation and find yourself overreacting comes down to whether or not you're mindful of yourself in that moment and whether or not you are reacting to your own fears, right?
Exactly, right. Well, everything in life, though, is a journey of self-discovery, because this whole experience is...
Oh, but we lost him for a second. Oh, we lost you for a second, Master OneFeather. Whole experience, say again?
Yeah, I think that, the life experience is all about self. And so that's really the core essence of the journey itself, is that everybody has their particular experience of all the elements that they encounter in life, and you know, that's how we have to process the whole thing, is from the individual angle, but taking us back to the collective understanding or realization.
Well, okay. I think I lost you on that. I think because we were interrupted, I didn't get the beginning and the end of it. But what I was inquiring about was ending the fight or flight syndrome in yourself. That was kind of where I was heading before we were interrupted by internet technology. How does one, end that fight with yourself? And I was putting out there that in the moment where you want to react, the first thing you have to do is stop down and look at the fact that you're operating from fear, or that there's fear there. That's what I had posed to you. And what was your response? I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, and it's, again, the way that we get around repeating that over and over again is to respond to fear with that higher understanding that we all are part of a collective, and that collective is the oneness. And so in reality, we, again, are invincible beings. We need not fear. And when we shift our identity to the collective or to the God consciousness, not the ego identity, but the spiritual identity, that's the first step in unraveling that seed of fear that gets planted with every instant that pops up in our life.
Mm. Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. I think that, and at the end of the day, people are needing love. But I can't always go. I'm not a Pisces, Master OneFeather. I can't always go. Some asshole cuts me off in traffic. I can't always go transcendental and sit there about how we're one with God. I want to fucking kill somebody.
No, I do the same thing.
I want to fucking kill somebody.
But that's
more practical solutions of not killing somebody.
Well, the whole thing is, you go off. You have your moment where you flip them off, scream something hideous out the window, and hopefully they're not carrying a gun and inclined to, react in their own way. But that's the beauty of the spiritual journey, is that after you have experienced this cataclysm that you created, this explosion of anger, which was a result of the fear, which is yada, 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 you can go back and release that by exercising forgiveness on two levels. You forgive the person who cut you off on traffic, and you say, okay, he was probably, his wife was probably pregnant and about to give birth, and he was on his way to the hospital. Give yourself a reason to forgive him, whatever that reason is. And then forgive yourself and say, I overreacted, but, that's just my lizard brain, and I forgive myself for that. So that's the way that we unwind our attachment, is not by trying to stifle the action in the moment, because all that's going to do is make you batshit crazy. What you have to do is go back and like any other wound, you don't just ignore it, you put a bandage on it, and the bandage is the act of forgiveness, and then that heals the wound.
I think that's very good advice. Absolutely, and I think that at that moment, the fear needs love. So I've learned that I have to start giving myself love. A lot of in fairness, I use the example of someone cutting me off in traffic, but that's not really what it has been. My lessons have been escalating to things where I can't blame anyone, not even myself. I guess you would say God, circumstances, timing, things not going my way.
Ego circumstances. Ego is the one who's always got the demands and the needs. I think that when we approach the divine is, oh, that's cool. But the ego has always got these attack dialogues that it generates for us. Oh, you failed. You fucked up. You miserable idiot. You didn't accomplish this. You couldn't make that happen. So we've got all of these different interior dialogues going along. And ultimately, what we have to do is recognize and differentiate. God is always in acceptance. It's like, oh, you want to, throw yourself in front of a bus? Okay, go ahead. but the ego is always this critical element that is always attacking us, and that's why, the core of the ego's rhetoric is strive but do not achieve. Over and over again, we try, and over again, we come out and get into our.
There's a little disconnect connection with people. Having some Midwestern issues, I guess, with the Midwest.
It's the plate in my head that screws up the radio waves and the internet waves, etc., etc.
Well, I would what I would offer to this, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think to some degree, because we are manifestors of life, and because emotion is so involved in manifestation, that when you're caught in a because I have a lot of clients, it's just one bad thing after another that happens to them, wave after wave. And of course, I know what's happening. They're gonna, I've been there. I'm just trying to get out of these type of things my whole life. There was a time when I was kind of maybe addicted to the highs and lows of it, and didn't even know it, like addicted to the rushes of it. Then, as I got older, I wanted life to be calmer because I didn't want these types of things. And what I will advise is this: it's like when you're in that wave, to end creating a new wave, the first thing you want to do is bring your own feelings back to a calm. You want to try to bring yourself back to a calm. And what I have witnessed since the solar eclipse in the last 5 or 6 days has been, I've tried to stay calm, and I'm letting these waves go past me now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first thing you do, is you just let them go past you. And my ego wants to react. I'm holding back a dog on a leash like, ruff, 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 ruff. I was like, shut up, dumbass. We're staying here. We are not reacting to this wave. We're going to let it go by. And I'm noticing that, like, the inertia of is dropping, and I do feel that this is a time for everyone. Is what I want to say, to that you can respond differently. I think what Master OneFeather is saying is absolutely correct, that it's based on love and fear, and if you have fear in your heart, I have found that by giving myself love deliberately, when I feel that anger, does calm me down. Just like if my son was angry and I started rubbing his chest, it would calm him down. So love, if you can find it somewhere in traffic, is a great solution. Self-love.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think that we've been given tools, the ancient tools to work with. One of the most immediately effective, I think, for a lot of us who have grown up in a Christian sort of society here in the Western world, is a very simple technique, which is just using the Lord's Prayer. Because it gets you back in that mindset of you are connected to divinity. You are connected to that which is eternal and perfect. And Jesus repeatedly said, God is love and God is life. So those are the two elements that we are always fearful of losing, and yet, they are eternally a part of us. They were incorporated in our very origin as beings. So, but Christopher, one of the things I find interesting is the first eclipse we had this year, the solar eclipse, it's actually technically the last solar eclipse, because we had one in spring. But this happened at 0 degrees of Scorpio, 30 degrees of Libra, and this next new moon is at 0 degrees Sag, which is 30 degrees Scorpio. So in a lot of ways you can see both of these new moon events as being very, very much a Scorpio phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a lot of encapsulation going on. And again, that kind of zeroes in on the idea that the current times are very powerful and have immense potential. And how are you going to embrace that? Where are you going to go with that?
I think you're absolutely correct, and I think that these will be emotional trends, like the way you respond now to yourself emotionally and whatnot, and those two eclipses, the 0 degrees, to me that is setting the 0 is the base note of anything. So this is kind of like God shaking off the carpet. One, with our emotional boundaries, what is our bare minimum, what we will tolerate, and I would say that everyone on the planet since the last solar eclipse in the next 15 days, you'll find you're going to hit some rock bottom. Not a rock bottom, but like somewhere in your life with taxes, with something, with a sale of something, and is here. You're going to draw it. And from that is going to be your foundation. And I think we're, come 10 years from now, that emotional decision that you made will happen in a fraction of an instant when you meet somebody in public, or will carry out in a fraction of an instant, becomes your subconscious precedent. So I would recommend everyone to pour in the love and try to neutralize the polarity of it in that moment. The other thing, I think you're right, Master OneFeather, putting spirit into action, like I have to say, that's really super important. And where spirit's in action? Dancing. I've been dancing. We used to dance around the fire. We used to, kind of sweat it out, and the whole village had to go. Mm-hmm. Culture used to have these things that helped us with these kinds of parts of frustrations of human, and we're missing a lot of those cultural things. I'm finding too that are important. Get yourself back out there. So go out there and dance, people.
Yeah, I think tribal society offers a lot of tools to work with. And I see a lot of people investigating, embracing it, trying to understand it, or feel looking for participation in it. I go to powwows, and a third of the people who join in the dance circle are not Native American, but they're there because they recognize that the tribal consciousness does in fact give them these tools that are very useful as far as getting outside of that sense of self and joining community and participating in something that has meaning for the entire tribe. So absolutely, I think our tribal consciousness, and it's not limited to just Native America. I mean, the Europeans had multiple tribes. They had the Celts, they had the Nordic people, the Normans, all of these different tribes. Africa has its tribes. China has its tribes.
Oh, for sure.
So you can explore your own personal tribal heritage too. I mean, you don't have to try to jump into somebody else's tribe or to take on the attributes of another tribe. You can go back and explore the roots of your own tribal DNA.
I think I'm all about modern tribe, which is electronica music. I like to go to electronica music festivals and dance with kids 18 to 45 and for 4 hours and go into that trance and dance with people. That's to me the modern place where I pull it off, or nothing else. The local disco, just dancing around people helps me out. But I think getting that frustration into action, like dance, yoga, exercise, will help you also let those waves go by, I guess is what I'm saying. Joelle, did you want to say something on fight or flight before we wrap up our show? You've been here quietly, and Mary as well, if you'd like to jump in. Is there anything either of you want to say, Joelle?
Yeah, sure, I can drop in some 2 cents. I mean, I've observed fight or flight very much in a physiological perspective with my background, and I actually see how that really ties into our own spiritual self. I mean, like today, I spent I was rushing to do a lot of things that I wanted to get done, and it's like, at what point do you have to trip to remind yourself, like, hey, where's a little self-loving here? What good are you going to do if you trip over and fall and you ruin the whole thing, right? So I see around me, I see society that we live in here generally, that everyone is so inundated that they are always in fight or flight mode, that their rest and digest, it doesn't happen. Even people probably with erratic sleep, not really being in that mode that they need. So there's definitely a huge imbalance in that respect. And I think that, as already has kind of been mentioned, the linchpin to finding that balance is acceptance and self-love. Because when your ego is getting the best of you over any situation, it's like, if you just take a moment to not react and catch your breath and be like, you don't know what that person's going through. They might be in a more messed up situation than you're feeling right now. So a lot of assumption and presumption is what creates all these stories and issues around in our head, and we don't have to play that game. But it's so important for people to know that you don't have to play that game. You're not just these thoughts and this body. There's so much more to you. So engage with the rest of you. Take a step back, breathe, feel yourself, and then observe before you jump on anything. So you can be a lot more conscious about what you're doing, and therefore a lot more conscious about how your body is going to respond for you, and it'll be a lot nicer to you as well.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice, and I have to say, sharing. I mean, I find that I have been overreacting, and so I'm trying to get all the way down to the initial fight or flight like nerves inside of me. And that's where I've gotten down. I've hit that spiritual, emotional rock bottom here, and that's where Leo risings are, by the way, and Leos at this moment. But I have to say, Joel, I am pulling myself back every 30 seconds.
Well,
like my inner child is like a 2-year-old. This is
because one needs something to be anchored with. If we're identifying so much with our physical selves and the egoistic stuff and all that, and you're just bouncing all over the place doing this and this and that, where's your constant? Where's your anchor? Something that you can be consistent with. Perhaps a mantra, perhaps go for a walk. Whenever you start to feel jittered, your protocol is, I'm going to go for a walk for 10 minutes or something. Go jump on a rebounder. I got to say, I put it off. I fight going into meditation. I fight going into rebounding every day to do these routines to support myself physically, emotionally, cognitively. And my ego's always fighting with me. I have to build in these mechanisms to keep myself grounded, so I have consistent rituals, if you will, that keep me sane, because when I engage with them, they activate other parts of my physiology that aren't having expression, right? I mean, for example, the hormones are going to be so imbalanced if we're just sitting here always trying to stress, get this done, do it that way, do it this way. But then you just go and jump on a rebounder for 10 minutes, and it's like you got way different set of hormones running through your body. You're going to be feeling a lot more elated. Not only can you come back with a more refreshed mind, you might even realize, hey, you know what? That's not really a priority right now at all. That was just, me getting ahead of myself. So we need to have these checks and balances if we have a tendency to let our minds and our egos run away with us, which happens for a lot of people. So
I think it happens all the time. And I think it happens in innocent ways. Like take a kid to Disneyland. His heart and ego is going to run like crazy. You're like, whoa, you're going to hurt yourself. Like, even in the best intentions, and that's what I'm saying. In the struggle of being human, I'm finding that, looking back at the history of mankind, it's like to totally lick it 100%, I'd have to be in a Buddhist monastery. Because to have to interact or go to 7-Eleven or anything that involves staying alive puts me constantly into this. There's just nothing normal about it. Maybe in 30 years when we talk, in Saturn and Scorpio next time, I'll be like, oh, I finally am default calm.
Probably
point, I'm still
the lesson that your parents pass on to you, because every child hears this. It's imagine putting yourself in that person's shoes. But everyone seems to forget about that little, probably one of the few good lessons that people receive from their parents, and when they're young. Come back to that. Put yourself in their shoes. Would you want to feel the rash resentment of yourself coming at that? And it's like, whoa, maybe not. Okay, breathe.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, for myself, actually, like I said, I have pulled back to where I'm not blaming or anything at all. When someone, the last time I had this, it's like I was just watching things fall, and I was just like, oh my God, the universe is trying to piss me off. I swear to God. Like, I didn't blame anybody. I could totally see. I'm like, there's a side of me that knows this is my Saturn Scorpio thing. Here's the opportunity. Here's the solar eclipse. So I saw it happen, but still inside, I still turned into the Incredible Hulk. And I had to calm down and go back to being a normal man naked after all my clothes got pulled off. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see. I think we'll get through it. Well, this is a good wrap-up point, folks. So we've been talking for almost an hour. And thank you, everyone, for showing up. Master OneFeather, very wise insight. And, folks, Master OneFeather has a show that comes out. Master OneFeather, tell us yourself about what you are discussing this week.
This week, well, I have actually two themes going on. The first is my Visions, Dreams, and Insights programs on YouTube. And I'll be talking about masks and Halloween.
Oh.
And the second one is a dialogue I have with a good friend, Barrett Hedeen, who is very grounded in A Course in Miracles, and we bounce around things around the Course. And again, we're going to be talking about the ego as our mask. So a lot of things, that are very much attached to the imagery of Halloween and spooks and ghosts and goblins.
I like Halloween. I think this week in Namaste today, I'm focusing on helping people get rid of these little ghosts and demons and stuff inside of them. And you can find out more information. You can get straight to Master OneFeather's YouTube by just going to the description of this YouTube video and a link there. He also sells readings at soulmart.me as well as myself there as well if you want to get in front of us. And we will be back in another 7 days with another spiritual topic. Thank you, Master OneFeather. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Absolutely, and for those of you who don't have pumpkins, get your ass out and get a pumpkin right now, because the season's going to pass you by.
They make you feel good, and I like pumpkin seeds too. They're yummy.
Yep.
Good for you. Yeah. Everyone have a happy and safe Halloween. Put up your emotional boundaries and make sure you take care of yourself. We'll see you next week. Live, love, be.
Bye.